The default model we get from Warcraft is optimized for a game engine and not for making artistic pictures or machinimas with. If we look at this model, we can see that many things could be improved, from the basic polygonal topology to the materials, which are lacking any variety except for color. In today's tutorial, I want to show you everything I managed to gather in the past 4 years about how to make the character look more appealing, more interesting, more realistic, and also about the problems that this brings. So let's hop into it, and I hope you learn something useful and have fun while at it. Blender has two render engines. You can find them here under the render properties. The one I use is Eevee. It's lightning fast, not entirely accurate, but gives very reasonable results, especially if what you make doesn't need to look photorealistic. The other one is Cycles. It's wonderful, it's high quality, it takes a million years to render, and if you overdo it with it, it burns your CPU. In this tutorial, and in most of my art since it came out, I use Eevee. And before we do anything at all in Blender, go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, look for Wrangler. This is the Node Wrangler add-on. It's awesome and I use it throughout this tutorial all the time. I recommend that you do too. XNLR mesh is awesome and saves us a lot of work, but sometimes it doesn't do a perfect job. For example, in this rig, half the face bones are missing. If you can't see your bones, go to layer number 2, go to Pose Mode, hit A to select everything, G to grab, and move them. If any bone moves any part of the body, you probably need it on layer number 1. If I go to layer 3, hit A to select everything, and hit G, I can see that those bones definitely move things, and therefore I need them on layer number 1. We can select them all by hitting A, hit M to move like mother, and click the first layer. Now we have all the useful bones on layer number 1. Similarly, XNLR Mesh puts a lot of bones that we don't use often in layer number 1. I call them the twisty bones, like this one. I like moving them to layer number 3 where they don't disturb me, but I can still use them when I want. You can test whether a bone is a twisty bone or not by selecting it and rotating. This is twisty. This is movie. Select them all. Hit M like mother, click layer number 3, and here they all are. Personally, I'm not a fan of all those colorful sets that XNLR Mesh creates. I find it's a visual mess. If you're like me, you can go to Properties, Armature tab, Bone Groups, hit the minus several times, get rid of them all and have the rig nice and white. Some bones are not properly aligned, so to make things a little more comfortable, let's go to Edit mode, select them, and manually move them to place. Sometimes moving the bones when they are displayed like this is not easy. If we want, we can change the bone display. Go to the Armature tab, Viewport Display, change from stick to octahedral. Now it's easier to select and move things. There are several other display methods, but I think stick is the most comfortable. You can test the others and see what suits you best. I find the facial bones very distracting when I try to make an expression, so I like to give them a shape of their own. To do this, I create an icosphere, Shift A, Mesh, Icosphere, go back to the armature, go to Pose Mode, select the facial bone you want to change the shape of, go to the Bone tab, Viewport Display, Custom Object, Icosphere. This is far too big. If you want to change the display of the bone size, changing this icosphere in object mode won't work. But it does work in edit mode. Hit tab to go to edit mode, S to scale, drag it down until you're happy with the size, hit tab again to exit edit mode. Now in pose mode we have this bone shaped reasonably. Instead of going manually and doing this with all the bones in the face, we can enable an add-on called Copy Attributes. Go to Edit, Preference, Add-ons, type Attributes in the search bar, tick it to enable it, and close it. Now let's hit C to circle select. Select all the facial bones, hit escape to exit circle select mode. To remove the bones we don't want in the selection, hit C again, but this time middle mouse click and drag over the bones you want to brush away from the selection. Click escape to exit circle select because as long as it's active you can't do anything. With all the facial bones selected, shift left click the one you already shaped, then Ctrl C, copy bone shape. This is the core bone, it moves the entire body. I also like giving it a distinctive shape. I already made my cube, so I'm going to go to Bone, Viewport Display, Custom Object, Cube. There it is. So here's some of the common problems you might bump into when you're working with a Warcraft character model. Let's hide the rig. Up here on the right we have the display options. We have the rendered, textured, solid, and wireframe. I find it's easier to see the problems with a character model when you're on solid, and if you click the drop down here, and go to Matte Cap, you also get rid of the annoying reflections. If in solid mode you see that part of the mesh doesn't look right, and even in edit mode, no matter what you do to it, it still just looks weird, that's usually a problem with the normals. Normals mean, where is this face directed? Is it looking at us, or is it showing us its backside? We can easily check that. If you go up here to overlays and tick face orientation, whatever is blue is facing us. Whatever is red is flipped inside out. Sometimes it creates weird artifacts, and if you export this to Unity, it's really going to give you some serious problems. To fix that, let's go to edit mode, select the flip faces, go to mesh, normals, flip. Now we can see it's all nice and blue. If you have weird artifacts, check that all your normals are faced correctly. Another good way of locating problems on the mesh is putting on a subdivision surface. Let's throw one here, and we can see all the problems. We have visible holes and seams in many places, and something really weird is happening in here. This is happening because we have overlapping vertices. They occupy the same location, but they are entirely separate. To solve this problem, go to edit mode, select everything, and go to mesh, clean up, merge by distance. We can exit edit mode, turn on the subdivision surface again, and see that most of our problems are gone. However, not down here. Even though we removed vertices, here we have a visible seam. In those cases, it's usually what's called non-manifold geometry, meaning there's a face hidden inside the mesh. Let's go to edit mode, change up here to face select. Select all those faces down and hit H to hide them. And now if we tilt our view, we can see that yes, we have a face there. We can simply select it, hit X to delete, and choose delete faces. Let's click Alt H to display everything again, tab to exit edit mode, subdivision surface, and now everything looks fine and we won't have any weird artifacts creeping up on us in the final render. However, subdivision surface reveals another problem. You see those weird stretch marks on his fingers, his arms, his face, and his chest. Now, it could be that this guy gave birth 4 times and he's just body positive, but if you don't want that look, the reason for this one is that our mesh is made of triangles. That's awesome for a game engine because it needs to be optimized, but since we're making still images or animations, we can exchange optimized for beautiful. The way we do this is selecting everything by hitting A and then hitting Alt J. This opens the tries to quads menu here, and then you want to click 1, 2, 3, and 4. By doing this, you avoid many problems with the textures that tries to quads might cause. Now if we take a look at our model with subdivision surface on, it looks beautiful, well defined, no weird artifacts, everything is fine. Another thing that's good to do is select everything in edit mode, and then go here to the object data tab, go to normals, and untick auto smooth. You see all those weird artifacts we have here? This fixes that. Although be careful, sometimes it creates more problems than it's worth, sometimes you want to have it on. And now when we make pictures with this, our model will look much better. The last problem I like to fix in the topology department is the fact that once we add a subdivision surface, everything looks very soft. While we gain definition where the topology is good, in many other places I feel it's lacking. We could sculpt details into the body or change the topology, but there's another easier way to get decent definition without destroying the model. Let's disable the subdivision surface and go to edit mode and find a place that needs definition. For example, the knees. I imagine troll knees to be very bony, very hard. This doesn't look hard enough for me, so let's see what we can do about it. Disable the subdivision modifier, go to edit mode, and let's select the edges which we want to pronounce. Go to edge select mode here. Shift left click on any edge you want to be hard. Now hit N like Nathanos Blightcaller, who was an awesome character and was entirely destroyed in Battle for Azeroth, becoming an uninteresting cackling villain and a lapdog to that bitch from the Horde. And under the item tab, you have something called min crease. This will crease the selected edges. You can take it all the way to 1, tab out of edit mode, turn on subdivision surface, and see that we have much more definition. This requires a bit knowledge in anatomy, but if you don't have that, I'll leave the model on the screen after I'm done and you can perhaps copy what I did. With very athletic people, the bone here is also pronounced. Left click this edge, then control left click the bottom and you automatically get the shortest path selection. Take the min crease to 1. Do the same on the other side. To view the effect, you want to have your subdivision surface on, preferably with a viewport of 2. Those toes look like lump of dough, so let's fix them as well. There is a tendon going up every finger and every toe. I like to define it too. You see the tendon ridge here ends kind of abruptly. We can solve this if we give the next edges along a lower mean crease. Now we have well-defined tendons, more befitting a race that evolved running in the jungles. Similarly, we can define the toenails, but this gives us a chance to see the problems that come with mean crease. Sometimes we get those artifacts. Remember I said that auto smooth is a fickle mistress? If I turn it on, the artifacts are gone. So I have to play with it and see what gives you the best result. I like defining the ankle bone on both sides, but not on full mean crease, because it's too much. Let's give it something like 0.6. Let's soften the transition of the tibia. Select those last two edges and take down the mean crease from 1 to 0.5. Each finger has a tendon going along it. With a wrist like the trolls, it's not unlikely that we'll see those tendons on the thumbs. We definitely need to define the knuckles on the fingers, but the tries to quad destroy the topology we need here, so let's edit with a knife tool. Hit K for knife, make a triangle on this finger, and a triangle on this one. Then select those edges, select the knuckles, select the tendon, and give it something like 0.7. So I looked at my fingers and I realized this is the wrong place for the knuckles. I'm going to get rid of these edges. Select them all, hit X, dissolve edges. Let's cut the knuckle definition again up here. With those still selected, give them some 0.9 and test it with Subdiv. I usually define the elbows too. Your selection might be different than mine. If your topology doesn't look exactly like mine, it doesn't matter. You can tweak it a little. Just make sure that you define things that look anatomically correct. I'm going to remove the hair for better access to the back. Mean crease depends on the angle where two faces meet. If they are concave, it'll make a crease. If they are straight or protruding, it'll make a ridge. So if I select the spine and give it a mean crease, and test it with Subdivision surface, you can see it looks fine at the top, but not so good here where it slopes inside. However, since this is not anatomically incorrect, I'm going to leave it there, because the ridge of the spine will be showing in this area where it is less fleshy. I'm going to check where the clavicle is on the texture, remember its location, then go here and crease that as well. The troll model is really well defined. Other races aren't that good, so on them you have to be a little more careful what you define and what you don't. Do you see this weird artifact here on this bicep? This happens because we have those tries here. I'm not going to go over the entire body and fix the topology, but when I see something like that, it's fairly easy to fix locally. Select it, hit X, dissolve edges. Now I got rid of that. So now we have a problem. I'd like to define the abs, but you see the way the faces meet here is a ridge. Meaning, if I give it a mean crease, it's going to look decidedly wrong. So what I usually do is duplicate this body so I have a backup, go to the original, go to edit mode, take the abdominal ridge and pull it back just a little. Something like that, so I have a nice valley here. And now if I put on the Subdiv, we have a bit of a muscle definition, which is exactly what I wanted. And while we're here, let's learn how to make belly buttons. Let's make the geometry for it first. Make sure your subdivision is off, otherwise everything's going to be slow and annoying. With face select activated, hit C and select all 4 of these. Then hit I to insert the faces, drag them to somewhere around here. Then take the knife tool and make a crosscut across the belly button. Now go to vertex select, take the corner and hit G twice so you can drag along the edge. Do this for all the rest. You want to remove the mean crease from here. We'd like to define the edge a little better, so we're going to hit R to make a loop cut around the belly button and bring it as close as we can without damaging the original. Let's check this in solid view. It barely shows, and with the texture it will not show, which is what we want. Now let's go back to object mode. Click the object data properties, and here you have shape keys. Shape keys are a way to change your topology without destroying it forever. You can make a switch for on-off to display the change you made. Click the plus to make the basis shape key, which saves the way your model looks like now. Then click the plus another time, and here under value, drag it all the way up. This is your key, you can change its name. I'm going to call it belly button. With that done, tap back into edit mode. Select the belly button faces, hit G to grab and Y to pull them back a bit. This is probably going to look very weird now. Testing it in edit mode, I can see it's far too symmetrical and a little too big. It also probably messed up the texture. Nope, it didn't. Let's tweak it and make it a little smaller. Also possibly a little less deep. Awesome, we have a belly button. The best thing about it is we didn't destroy the mesh. We can tweak the belly button on or off at will, so if we have a bit of gear which does not display this magnificent example of troll anatomy, we can just turn the belly button off. I want pronounced knuckles on the thumb, so I'm going to make them with a knife tool. If it ends up looking weird like it does here, remove the min crease or try lowering the amount. And last, there's a tendon that goes up here along the thumb. There is no loop cut for it, but I don't want to make one, so I'm just going to sort of bullshit my way through it and make a hint of it approximately close. Let's give the hamstrings a bit of definition. And while we're here, let's see if we can change this weird artifact on his bum. Select the edges and dissolve them. Yeah, that looks better. I like also defining the ears. I want to move this vertex so I can get a nice flowing line that follows the texture. However, remember we made a shape key. If I move this vertex now, this is going to be stored in the belly button shape key. I don't want that. So any such changes that I make here, which are to the base mesh and I want stored in the base mesh, I need to go to the shape keys and make sure I'm standing on the basis and not on any other shape key. With this done, let's hit GG, move this vertex to place, do the same with this one. Follow the shape of the ear as much as we can. There's no need to go crazy about it because nobody actually looks in troll's ears. I hope. Ew. And with those lines vaguely in place, let's go back to edge select, select the edges we want to define, and give them a nice min crease. Here you go, that's what I wanted. Then back here we have the Achilles tendon. And that too should have a fade, so let's give these edges a crease of about 0.5. I think this model looks decent now, so we can move to the next part. With the topology fixed, we can move on to materials and vertex groups. A vertex group is a very useful tool where you define a group of vertices to do something. They can have a specific material different to all the others. They can be bound to a specific bone, like the finger vertices bound to the finger bones, and so on and so forth. With the model arriving straight from WoW Model Viewer, we have many materials here. This is actually very useful, because if we go to Edit mode, click this material and hit select, we'll get all the vertices associated with that material. This is the torso. And since there will be times in the future where we will want only the torso selected for various reasons, let's say putting a different tabard on it, I like saving that. This stage is not necessary at all, but I find that if I work with the same model time and time again, I like having those vertex groups ready for me to save me having to manually select things whenever I need them. Let's drag the corner to open another window. Take this drop down here and open another properties panel, just like this one, only here. But here we'll go to the object data properties and look at vertex groups. You can get to it here, but it's easier to have another one open. I click this material, hit select, go here to vertex groups, hit plus to add another one of my own. It's added here under the name group. I hit assign. This assigned all those vertices to this group. Now I'm going to rename it something easy to find which I can use later if I ever need a chest group. Double click it. I name it AA chest. This way I know that all the groups that I made have the AA prefix and are easier to find. Hit assign, Alt A to deselect everything. This material, select. These are the eyeballs. Make a new group, assign, Alt A to deselect. I do the same with all the other materials. This material is applied to many faces. I'm going to separate them. The easiest way to do it is to hide all the rest. So let's hit Alt A to deselect everything. Click this one, select. Again, select. Now that we have all the others selected, click H to hide. This makes selecting easier. Let's also go to wireframe mode so we can easily select through. Hit B to box select, left click and drag. Release and we have selected the hand. Plus, assign, rename. Hit H to hide. Do the same with all the rest. Hit Alt H to reveal everything that was hidden, Alt A to deselect everything, and Tab to exit edit mode. Let's also go back to solid view. Now I can consolidate the materials just like shown in the beginning tutorial. We're finished with the vertex group, so we can just left click and drag up here to collapse this window onto the other. We don't need it anymore. It's also good practice to name your materials. Saves you a lot of confusion later. It's time to fix and beautify these materials. It's not only going here and removing the metallic and specular. There's a lot more we can do to make this troll look better. Let's see what we have here. We'll need several materials. We already have the skin and the hair. We'll need one for the eyes, the tusks, the gold, and possibly the golden tattoos. To create a new material slot, we hit the plus here in the material panel. This only creates a slot, not a real material. Let's hit new. Now it made a material. Let's call this one eyes. Let's prepare materials for all the rest. Now we're getting to the fun part, which is making materials. Let's click and drag the corner here. From the drop-down menu, choose the shader editor. It has a tool shelf on the right. We can hide or display it with N like Noggin Fogger. We have these material slots, but A, all these materials are the neutral white, as you can see here in the preview. And B, they're not assigned to any vertices, so we can't see them on the model. Let's start with the eyes. They're easy. Select the model, hit Tab to go to edit mode. Select these two vertices on the eyes, and hit Ctrl plus to expand your selection. We have the eyes selected, and now we can hit Assign, and this material is assigned to the eyes. The node editor can look intimidating, but it's fluffy and marshmallows and poppies and rainbows, and it's going to be your best friend. These are called nodes. The last one is the material output. It tells Blender to actually display what we just did. The shader controls how this material reflects the light. For example, if I take the metallic all the way up, you can see his eyes became glossy. I can also take the roughness down to make them completely reflective. The principled BSDF shader combines many shaders inside it. Metallic, specular, with all the things that control them. It's very useful. Most of the times we'll be using that, sometimes we won't. You don't have to get intimidated by the multiple options here, because usually we only use 3 or 4 of them. However, for this eye material, we don't need the principled BSDF shader. Let's get rid of it. Select it and hit X. Troll eyes glow. So we're going to bring something that emits light, specifically an emission shader. Hit Shift A, Shader, Emission. Put it here. Plug the emission into the surface, because the surface is where it will be shown. And now we can make his eyes glow. To bring back the Warcraft texture, hit Shift A, Texture, Image Texture. Put it here. Click the arrow to open the drop-down and select the body. Now we can plug the yellow socket to the yellow socket. Take the emission back down so it doesn't burn the texture. You can even go here to the TV tab and tick Bloom to give the glow this beautiful extra oomph. We're done with the eye material. Let's do the tusks. Select this one, go to edit mode, click Shift A to deselect the eyes. Now we could select the tusks manually, but this is exactly what we saved the vertex groups for before. Go to Object Data, click the triangle to open the search menu, and look for tusks. Click this one, click Select, and rejoice at your own wisdom. Let's go back to the Material tab, select the Tusks material, and Assign. To get back the texture, like before, we hit Shift A, Texture, Image Texture, find the texture here, plug the color to color, and because the tusks are a bone, we can take the specular up, take the roughness a little down if they're very polished, and give them a little more personality. Next we have the gold. We don't have that one selected, but it's easy to select. Go Tab to Edit Mode, Alt A to deselect everything, hover over the earring and hit L. This selects all the linked vertices, therefore L. Do the same here, and the same here, and assign the gold material. Alt A to select everything. Now we need to select the rings on the tusks. I'm going to bring back the tusk selection. Select. Control I to inverse selection. H to hide everything. And now I'm going to hit Shift, Alt, left click on this ring of vertices and do the same on the other one. Shift, Alt, left click. With those selected, I can hit Ctrl A several times until I've expanded the selection to cover all the gold. Go back to the Material tab, hit Assign, Alt A to deselect everything, Alt H to unhide everything, Alt A to deselect everything again, and Tab to exit edit mode. Let's bring the texture, Shift A, texture, image texture, drop down, body, plug the color to color, we have the gold again, take the metallic all the way up, the roughness all the way down, and rejoice at your tastelessness. Now for the most fun, the skin. This is the skin material as it came with the FBA. We can get rid of those two bottom nodes, we don't need them, select them and hit X. I think many people use the principled BSDF, but I'm still old-fashioned and I do it the way I used to do it before principled was even around. I'm going to get rid of the principled, hit Shift A, bring in shader, diffuse shader, Shift A again, shader, glossy shader, because the skin is both diffused and glossy and I want to be able to control these two separately. Because we have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, we can just Control, Shift, right-click on the diffuse and drag, and we get a mix shader here. Let's connect this one to the surface. Then with the texture, connect the color to the color socket on both of them. And the mix shader will control how much diffuse is showing and how much glossy is showing. All the way to the left is diffused. All the way to the right is a bottom socket, which is glossy. Find something that looks relatively skin-like. I tend to get far too glossy far too fast, so don't make my mistake. With the roughness, we can make him sweatier or sweaty less. The next thing we can do to make the skin look a bit better is something that it direly needs. It's pores. To make those, we're going to use a function called bump. It fixes bumpiness on the skin. It could be a painting, a texture, a tattoo, a scar, or in our case, pores. Hit Shift A, texture, noise texture. Bring it here. If I Control Shift left click it, I can see what it looks like, which is not very impressive. It actually has colors, but we're not going to be using those today. This doesn't look much like pores, but if we take the scale up to, let's say, 100, you can see the potential there. However, those so-called pores are stretched right now, which is not very realistic. To fix this, have the noise texture selected, hit Ctrl T, and here change the texture coordinates from generated to object. This looks much better, no stretching, all nice and even. To make this into something bumpy, we're going to add a bump node. Hit Shift A, vector, bump, plug the factor to the high. Then you see we have this purple socket here. We're going to pull it to the normal of the glossy and the normal of the diffuse. And we have a strange sand monster. Let's take down the strength until it looks good. And if you want to make the pores smaller, we need to have a higher number here on the noise texture because it's unintuitive and Blender is trying to kill you. I like having it at around 400. On this troll, I think 300 will be fine. Let's make the material for the gold tattoos. Gold is metallic. For this we'll need a glossy shader. Shift A, shader, glossy. Make it nice and yellow. And if you Control Shift left click, we can see our material and control how reflective it is. So we have the gold. But if we go to edit mode, we can see that the tattoo doesn't conform to the topology. We can't select any faces to give them the gold material. It will not follow the tattoo. So we're going to use a different technique, and this technique is called masks. Let's hit Shift A, shader, mix shader, plug it here on this noodle, plug the gold material to the other socket, we adjusted the tasteless shininess of this effect, and we can change the ratio between the two. Or, in here to the factor, we can plug a mask. Now don't do this, this is just for example. I'm going to bring in a wave texture. That looks like that, black and white. And I'm going to take the color from this one and plug it into the factor of the mix shader. What's black in the mask shows the top socket, aka the skin. What's white in the mask shows the bottom socket, aka the gold. I can play with the mask to get various effects. So optimally, we need a mask exactly the shape of the tattoo. You could take the texture to Photoshop and trace it manually and make a black and white mask if you're very masochistic or you have nothing better to do with your life. Or you can go to the Marlamin and Krutner WoW exporter, go to textures, and here search for troll. If you want to specifically search for troll tattoo, you need to add period, asterisk, tattoo. Find the relevant one, make sure transparency is ticked, otherwise this is not half as efficient, and hit export as PNG. In Photoshop or GIMP or Krita or whatever it is you use, bring the original texture, make a white layer over it, bring in the tattoo we just got from the Marlamin, which is conveniently on a transparent background, hit Ctrl left click to make a selection of this layer, make a new layer, and fill the selection with black. You're done. Give this some reasonable name, save it as JPEG, and let's get back to Blender. Now in the skin material, hit Shift A, texture, image texture, open, navigate to wherever you saved it and bring it in. We can Ctrl Shift left click to view this and make sure everything's fine. Since it is, let's take the color socket from here and plug it to the factor socket of the mix shader. This is exactly the opposite of what we need. We can just switch the noodle locations, like this. If like me you think this gold is too goldy and you want the original Warcraft texture on it, bring it in. and drag the color to the color on the glossy shader. We're nearly done with that. Now let's look at his clothes such as they are. I don't think that even trolls have pores on their underwear, so let's make a quick mask and define a different material for this glorious garment. Go back to your favorite photo editing software, make a selection around the underwear. On a new layer, fill it with black, save it with a reasonable name. Back in Blender, make the gear material. This of course is case dependent, you can make armor, leather or anything you want. Here's the horror I made. I'm going to mix it with the rest of the skin material using the mask I just made. Let's duplicate this mix shader, Shift D, throw it on this noodle, it connects automatically, and plug the gear material into the other socket. This looks hilarious, we have some weird lizardman troll. Let's bring in the mask we created. It looks like this. Plug it into the factor of the mix shader, and flip the noodles if you need to. Now you can turn on the subdivision surface and enjoy your improved model. Believe it or not, this tutorial was supposed to have at least 5 more things in it, like making any hairdo you want with mesh hair, character customization, different body types and so on and so forth, storing armor parts inside the character so you don't have to constantly bring them and clean them from our model viewer, but it became awfully bloated and it's far too long as it is, so thus we'll have to wait for the next tutorial if I make one. Until then, I demonstrate all of those and more in my streams, and you're welcome to drop by if you think you'll enjoy it. We also have an awesome little community, and the other reason I'm making this tutorial. I hope you found this tutorial interesting, I hope you learned something new and that you're fired up with inspiration to try it, and I hope you make pretty art. Take care, have fun, and see you next time.